It was a pretty disappointing game week for me in game week 5. I've dropped down to 500k overall, but I've got my wild card in hand and 3 free transfers. And in this video, I'm going to take you through my transfer plans for game week 6. Alright then, so I just wanted to quickly go through how my team actually got on in game week 5. So we had Dean Henderson in goal. I'm quite happy, to be honest, that I stayed patient with him. Of course, other goalkeepers are outscoring him, but I don't like to use a transfer on a goalkeeper if I can really help it, because I always find that goalkeepers can score good points in games where you least expect it. For example, you could get a penalty save against a good team and a load of saves bonus points, or a clean sheet just at random, and that's kind of what Dean Henderson did against Man United, right? I certainly didn't expect him to keep a clean sheet in that game, but he did. Unfortunately, got a yellow card, brought him down to 9 points, but a combination of good amount of saves and a clean sheet there, he did quite well for me. I'm quite happy with that. Robinson, Guardiola, and Aina in defence. Aina was my transfer in for game week 5, or my only transfer. Disappointing from him. Obviously, conceded a couple of goals against Brighton and got a yellow card for a 0-pointer. And doubly annoying is I've got Colwill on the bench. I just didn't rate Chelsea going into the last 2 game weeks, so I benched him, and he's got 2 clean sheets while he was on my bench this week. I actually had to start him last week, so I think in game week 6 I'm gonna rethink whether I want to start him or bench him. Basically, Gordon, Eze, Salah, and Smith Rowe in my midfield. I think it's time for Anthony Gordon to go. In fact, before we go on to Anthony Gordon, forgot to speak about Guardiola. He's been a little bit disappointing. Some games he hasn't started, hasn't looked all that attacking. He did look good from an attacking perspective against Arsenal, particularly in that second half, but I really do think that was down to game state. Arsenal were really sitting back for that second half, and it was only natural that Guardiola was going to move into a more attacking position, particularly considering that Kyle Walker was on the pitch, right? I don't think Kyle Walker personally had that good of a game in that fixture, which makes me think that Rico Lewis's place in that Man City team could be just that bit more nailed. And when he is in the team, Guardiola is the one that sits back as part of the back three and is less attacking. So I do think Guardiola's days in my team are numbered, and with some fixture swings for some teams, I do think it's probably time to get rid of him, and I'll talk about that in a second. Yeah, but speaking about Gordon, he's been a bit disappointing. Newcastle in general have been a bit disappointing. I think, Smith Rowe deserves his place in my team. I can't bring myself to sell Salah. Eze, he's been frustrating. I'd love to get him Bumo, but I just don't have the cash to do it. So I think Anthony Gordon's going to be the one to make way. I'll talk about some potential suggestions for him. Isak, again, another disappointing one. I just don't think Newcastle have been at the races at all. They got Man City in game week 6, so I think I'm probably going to get rid of those two. Haaland, I didn't actually have him as my captain. Salah was my captain for his obviously 6-pointer. And then Solanke, really happy I kept faith with him. I just love the idea of having like a tried and trusted, Premier League goal scorer who was in my team as a differential. And, with only 6 points, obviously, both him and Smith Rowe actually lost points on the Sunday evening due to the bonus points being changed, which was a little bit disappointing. If you watch back my my reaction stream on the Sunday evening, you'll see my live reaction to those points getting taken away, which was obviously a little bit disappointing. But obviously, I'm happy with him. He's got Man United away in game week 6, and well, I think Spurs have got a pretty decent record at Old Trafford, to be honest. They always seem to score goals there, and I think Solanke will be involved. So, looking at my team, there are 3 players that I'm, with my 3 free transfers, that I'm pretty upset with, being Guardiola, Gordon, and Isak, and I'll talk through what I could potentially do with them now. Now, the first player I'm eyeing up bringing in is Gabriel, and I was a little bit worried on Sunday night that his price would go up, and I wouldn't be able to, so I don't have anything in the bank, basically. Guardiola's 6 million, Gabriel at the time was 6 million, and I was a little bit worried about being priced out of making the move. So, spoiler alert, on Sunday evening I did the swap. I did Guardiola to Gabriel, and my thinking behind that was I'm pretty close, in my opinion, to wildcarding with this team. And yes, using a transfer and losing it on the other end of the wildcard wipes out the transfers you've used, right? So my thinking was, if I bring him in and it goes wrong, they've got a game against Bolton, I believe, on Wednesday. If he starts, gets injured, or maybe other Arsenal players I'm looking to bring in start and get injured, or any other players I bring in, I could just play the wild card and reset all those transfers because, you know, the price rises for me. I've been the most impacted this season by FPL price changes as I have in my entire time playing the game. And I just don't want to be priced out of having a team that I like, particularly when I've got my wild card kind of as a safety net. I was quite happy to make the move and then I can just blow my wild card and get my transfers back, basically. So, Gabriel is in. He's in. He's the top defender for expected points over the next 3 game weeks. He's got, well, Leicester, Southampton and Bournemouth up, which means, well, you've seen how good he is from an attacker perspective, right? He scored 2 goals in 2 successive games so far from corners. And the clean sheet odds are looking great as well. 58% likelihood against Leicester, 58 again against Southampton and 43 against Bournemouth. 58% likelihood to keep a clean sheet, according to DraftHand, means he's more likely than not, according to their odds, to keep a clean sheet in both of those games. And then 43%, I'd also suggest, are pretty good odds of a clean sheet. So, you know, there's goal potential from set pieces, real clean sheet potential, 6.1 million. I think he's great value. And you look at his stats across this season, 2 goals in 3 clean sheets from 5 starts. He's got a return in each game for each start that he's made, basically, whether that be through a goal or a clean sheet. 0.21 expected returns per 90. Just hold that figure in your head. Comparing him to Trent, who I would get Trent in, I'm not going to lie. If I could afford to get Trent in, I would, but I don't. I've only got 6 million available. And so comparing Gabriel to his alternative would be, I'd suggest Robertson, who's currently on 0.19 expected returns per 90. So Gabriel's slightly in the lead in that regard. And I just think fixture-wise, you know, the Arsenal fixtures are probably a little bit better. So my decision basically was between Gabriel and Robertson. I, again, would have loved to have brought Trent in, but I just didn't have the cash to do it and stick to my transfer plans. So I think it made sense to bring in Gabriel. And just looking at the demographic of FPL right now, it's looking like bringing in Arsenal players, particularly for people wildcarding, etc. Double Arsenal defence, for example, is going to be really popular. I don't think I can get to double Arsenal defence myself. You've seen my team and my plans for defence. But, you know, I do think I need to have some coverage. So, yeah, I brought in Gabriel. I did it early. I know early transfers, I said, don't make early transfers. But I've got my wildcard as backup. And, you know, the team as it is, I think some people would consider playing a wildcard with this team because I would say there are 4 or 5 players that you potentially want to get rid of here. Looking at potentially getting rid of Henderson, Guardiola, Gordon, Isak, maybe even Eze, Johnson, for example. You know, I could get a starting 4 million defender in there as well. Robinson, his fixtures change. I've gained a bit of price in him. You know, plenty of changes I can make there. So, little spoiler as to who's coming in next. Plenty of changes I could make to this team. So, yeah, I've gone for Gabriel early. I teased my next transfer in. I'm going to free up some cash with a move in the forward position, which allows me to do Anthony Gordon to Bukayo Saka. Now, providing there aren't, well, if we get news or wind of price changes that happen over the next couple of days, again, similar to what I did with Gabriel, I'll do the move early because I said I've got the wild card as backup. But I really like the thought of going for Saka. He's just obviously Arsenal's talisman, best player and penalty taker. He's absolutely nailed on to start on the right. Plays 90 minutes pretty much every game, apart from, of course, against Man City. But I do think that was definitely a tactical move. I just think Arteta preferred to have Martinelli out there because I just think he's a little bit quicker than Saka. And if he ever wanted to play the ball long and make an out ball, I think Martinelli's the better player to do that than Saka, which I think was his reasoning for making that switch. And obviously allowed for Ben White to come in as well. So I do think it was a tactical thing, nothing to do with Saka's performance or injury. I just think it was how he wanted to set up to try and keep Man City out, basically. It's not the case for Fantasy Football Hub, but when you look at the FPL review, top players for expected points for Game Week 6, and you know, some people would look at FPL review as absolute gospel for players to pick and who to captain, etc. I don't. I really respect FPL review and think it's great, but I like to apply a bit of my own logic plus the FPL review kind of stats. But FPL Review has Saka as the top player for expected points for Game Week 6. So they suggest that he is the best captain. And one thing about Saka, right? So he put up 16 goals, 12 assists last season. And over the last 3 seasons, every season, his total level of returns has gotten better and better each year. I'm not suggesting that, you know, he's reached his peak or prime yet. I think he could get even better this season. He's got 6 returns so far from his 5 starts. Obviously more weighted towards assists, from a lot of them being from his corner taking. 0.66 expected returns per 90. You know, about the same level that he was putting up last season. Goal threat a little bit less, I'd say, per game. But, you know, there's plenty of football to go. And you'd imagine Leicester, Southampton, Bournemouth are a good, you know, good chance for him to score goals. So, yeah, with all that in mind, the fact he's the top player for expected points, yeah, I think Saka is going to be a transfer in. I'm going to bring him in for Gordon and free up a bit of cash in the forward position. I'll tell you how I'm going to do that in a second. Before I do move on to the forward, there's one other player that I just can't deny as a good option as well. I've spoken about him probably for the last 4 or 5 game weeks in my videos, right? But honestly, Bryan Mbeumo is looking like a really good option. And it's going to be really hard to go without him, which is why I always have to consider him as an option. He's just obviously Brentford's absolute talisman and best player, right? He's on penalties, free kicks, plays 90 minutes every game. I'd suggest at this point, they're going to, by the deadline, there'll probably be 0.3, 0.4 million in it in terms of their price. As they down to 6.9, I think Mbeumo might go up again to 7.3. That might happen by the time this video goes up. I'm recording this again early morning on Tuesday before work. So, you know, we've got a day of potential price rises to happen. So, and that could happen to Saka as well, maybe even Gabriel too. So, don't pay too much attention to the prices I've got here. But yeah, you can't deny Mbeumo as a good option, right? And when I've got Eze in my team, who I can't deny has been a bit disappointing in recent game weeks, I cannot ignore Mbeumo, right? And similar to what I said about Saka, I just love players in FPL that are on penalties, free kicks, their team's kind of absolute talisman, and play 90 minutes because it just ticks all the boxes you want from a good asset. They're on the pitch for every minute. Even if their team's not playing well, all they need is a free kick or a penalty to have a chance of a goal. And I would say definitely Mbeumo is the best midfielder under around 8 million. 4 goals from 5 starts so far this season. That's what I should say 1.61 XG rather than 161. One thing I would point out though, he is obviously massively outperforming his XG so far. So maybe that level of returns per game might drop. But I do think he's underperforming in terms of assist rate, right? So there could be some assists coming. Numbers wise, expected returns per 90, slightly less than he was putting up last season. But realistically, trying to get my words out there, you know, it's only 5 games. So it's a smaller sample size. I think he'll be just fine. Yeah, he could well go up to 7.3 million by the time this video goes up. But that doesn't take away from the fact that he is a really good option. Now then, in order to fund my Gordon to Saka move, I have the exact cash with 0.1 million spare at the moment to do Isak to João Pedro. Now, on the face of it, João Pedro looks like he could be a really good option. The Brighton penalty taker, the Brighton manager has been so complimentary about João Pedro in press conferences, basically calling him the difference maker in the team, even though, of course, he didn't start. But that was more due to injury and fitness from international break rather than, you know, his view on where he fits into the squad. I just think, based on what the manager has said about him, when he's fit, he should be nailed on to start. And for me, you know, he's probably the best striker for the money I have available. However, some news emerged last night. He was, I believe, live streaming FIFA or just playing FIFA. And he posted on his Instagram a picture of him doing so. And there were some crutches behind the screen that he was playing on. And there was a report on Reddit. Obviously, you know, anyone can post on Reddit, right? But there was a report on Reddit of someone suggesting that he left the stadium on crutches after the game against Nottingham Forest. So, obviously, was suspect to that bad challenge by Gibbs White. Obviously ended up with Gibbs White getting sent off towards the end of the game. So, yes, I want to bring in João Pedro. And I'm going to be completely honest. I've made all of the moves that I've wanted to already because I was very close to being priced out of it. Gordon went down in price again. So I had to make the move because I thought, well, Saka's definitely going to go up in price, right, this week. There's no way he's not. I think a lot of people are going to be buying him. And yeah, I went for João Pedro because he's the only striker I could afford at the price that I would think is a reasonable replacement for Isak. And if it all goes wrong and he's confirmed out or whatever, I can just hit my wild card. So right now, I have done Gabriel in for Guardiola, Saka in for Gordon, and João Pedro is in for Isak. Expected points-wise for João Pedro looks good. He's obviously the Brighton penalty taker. Chelsea, Tottenham, Newcastle. I wouldn't rule out his potential to be able to score in all those games, to be honest. So I like him as an option, but we just got to keep an eye on this injury news. Unfortunately, I made most of these transfers. I did the Gabriel one on Sunday night, and I did the other 2 on Monday night because I saw that Gordon's price was pretty much guaranteed to go down, and it has. So if I didn't make that move, I'd have been completely priced out of doing so. So I've had to go for it. And then the news, the blooming picture of João Pedro crutches behind the screen literally came out about 30 seconds after I made the moves. It's absolutely, you couldn't write it. So I might just be about to become a victim of making early FPL transfers because I never liked doing it. But ultimately, I was going to be priced out of making any moves that I wanted to and really having quite a bad team going into Game Week 6. And given, of course, like I keep saying that I have my wildcard in hand, I think it was worth doing. Just go back to the team a second. So yeah, those are kind of my transfer plans at the moment. I'll update things with the team selection video. I'll have that out on Thursday because we'll have a bit of news on terms of players. Arsenal will have played their midweek fixture. Things might have changed and I might have activated my wildcard by that time. So as it goes so far with my team, I've done Guardiola to Gabriel, Gordon to Saka and Isak to João Pedro. And we just have to wait for injury news and updates on Arsenal, basically. But I could well be using my wildcard this week after all. All right, and that's the end of the video. Again, feels my last transfers plans video was a little bit rambly, and it feels like this one was the same. But that's the kind of general concept of the video, you know, just to get my thoughts on my team and, you know, my sort of thought procedures behind transfers. Ultimately, you know, I've made early transfers, which I would usually poo-poo and say is a bad idea, and they might well end up being. But because I've got that wild card in hand, and my team, I think, is so close to being one that can be wild carded anyway, I'm not too concerned about doing so because, you know, the wild card resets your transfers and you're back ready to go for the week after. So, yeah, just something, yeah, I've been thinking about. And I'm hoping that I've made the right decision there. We'll find out as the week goes on in terms of João Pedro's fitness and how Arsenal get on in their cup fixture against Bolton. If you enjoyed the video and found it useful, please leave me a like rating. You can subscribe to, pointing in the wrong direction there, you can subscribe to the Golden Goal channel, which should be just there on your screen. 75% of people watching have not subscribed to the channel. So if you enjoy my content, please do so. It'd be great. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you in my next video.